Here's Frank Corrado, former Vancouver Canuck TSN hockey analyst, and he gets our vote for best dressed yesterday on the TSN free agent.
Chef's kiss on the
Frenzy.
light blue.
Oh, the suit was magnificent,
nice.
Frank.
Yeah.
Thanks.
The
boys.
information was fine too. The information was fine. Give or take.
I had to try and distract everyone from the lack of content, the lack of juicy content that we had. So I said, let me brighten it up a little bit with the suit. Although Gino had the double-breasted, and then he came up to me about halfway through the show. He goes, I'm doing a wardrobe change today. I said, what? He goes,
Was this a Cher concert?
And he brings out the creamsicle pink unit. And I'm like, Gino. He goes, hey, I told you I was doing the wardrobe change. He made it count.
Oh, my God.
Did he ever? I mean, you have to have some kind of panache to wear the light blue double-breasted with the white buttons and then change into the creamsicle.
Hey, Bobby Mack's last entry was pretty
Mack
good.
went out in a blaze, too, fashion forward.
Yeah, that was pretty cool to be a part of.
I'm sure.
And to see that up close. First of all, congratulations to Bob. It was, you guys lived it, growing up, watching Bob, listening to Bob, hanging on his every tweet on those big days. And the thing, he just did it with so much class and integrity. And you're just not going to find people that have bad things to say about Bob, really. He was the original. He was the best. And he's going out on his own terms. And it was, congratulations to him. Because that was pretty emotional.
Because he's done it in stages, was he a little less emotional because he'd already been mostly retired?
I don't know. I don't know if he was less emotional than he would have been, but I think he did it the right way, right? Like the soft retirement, kind of lessen the workload, and then now drive up to the cottage, and maybe we'll never see him again. We'll never hear from him again.
Well, as he said to Duthie, I'm not even going to return your call anymore. And a couple of things I just want to highlight about Bob. First of all, the guy you saw on TV is Bob, but the guy we knew in the flesh and blood, in the flesh and blood, is a lot funnier than the guy.
Hilarious.
Like the dry one-liners were incredible over the years. Tell a quick story here. We were up in Penticton at Canucks Young Stars. This was after you, Frank. We're sitting around a big table having dinner. Bob shows up a little bit late. The conversation is about that week's Master Chef, where the contestants were asked to cook really obscure
exotic meats,
exotic proteins. Bobby walks in and, what are you guys talking about? I said, the Master Chef episode. And he goes, oh, how about them bull testicles, huh? So the table roars. And then I'm like, Bob, this is my partner, Carmen. And she's like, I've been watching you on TV my whole life. And the first words out of your mouth in the flesh are bull testicles.
That's amazing.
All right, let's move on. What did you make of the Canucks work?
I think that's a good day for the Canucks. I, like basically a lot of others, thought that Brock Boeser was out the door. And that's a lot of goal scoring that you had to replace. Is he the most perfect player? No, but he's a damn good player. And as far as, pure goal scorers that were available in that UFA class, right near the top of the list, maybe the top guy, once we got to July 1st. So it's really big that the Canucks were willing to go to 7 years, and he wanted to stay. And like that, all in all, that's a pretty good period for them. Like Demko's back, Garland's back, Boeser's back. And think about that. 2 years ago, trying to trade Garland, couldn't do it. He's played so well for the team. He's earned every bit of that extension. In theory, I guess, going by what they said, tried to trade Boeser, couldn't get a return you liked. And I thought that was like, well, that's it. If you're going out there saying that publicly, that you can't get a decent enough return for this guy, so you're just going to keep him, it's like, all right, well, screw you guys. I'll be out of here the first chance I have. And he doesn't do that. He circles back, gets to 7 years. I think that's good work for the Canucks. And I would say in the bigger picture, we're always kind of watching the Quinn Hughes thing. Like at some point, that's going to be a dilemma, but you're no worse at this point because you have good players coming back that, maybe don't make you a Stanley Cup contender on paper right now, but at least keep you competitive and in the mix to make the playoffs if everything, goes better than it did last year. So that's a good July 1st for that team.
The Canucks are an example of what we saw around the league, where the cap hits were really not anything to quibble about. Terms were a little bit longer, maybe in some cases, and I think you could argue that with both Garland and Boeser. But the cap hits really are pretty palatable in an escalating cap era. Like in a flat cap era, it's acceptable, that contract. In an escalating cap era, it's entirely digestible, isn't it?
I think what a lot of people were bracing for was cap is going up $7.5 million and teams are just going to spend. But they looked at who was available and they said, well, why? Why am I going to do this to myself? I'm just going to cap myself out on guys that are, bottom six players that don't really move the needle. Make the signings you need to make. But I think teams also looked at it and said, for the first time, we will have flexibility. And with all these teams that feel like they are quote unquote buyers or teams that want to be competitive, and not many teams really, kind of waving the white flag saying we're sellers. I think the flexibility is going to do teams a lot of good once we get into the season and teams start to realize, wait a second, we're actually not good. And we're going to have to be sellers to a certain degree here in order to recoup some assets. And I think a lot of teams probably look at that and say, let's position ourselves well so that if something comes up by November or December, we can strike on it. And I think what happened this year as well is because the cap went up, you just didn't have the cap casualties that all these good teams, including the Florida Panthers, were supposed to have. It happens all the time. Happened with Chicago, happened with Colorado. That flexibility kind of gave teams the ability to keep guys in-house. So you didn't have that overflow of guys that, hey, we would love to keep them, but we can't. And so, that really made the primary market what would have normally been a secondary market. And I don't think teams were willing to overspend for the most part on those types of players. And I think that's mostly smart by those guys.
What did you make of the Conor Garland extension 6x6, which kicks in next year at age 30?
You know what? Yeah, you can quibble about a year or two here and there, $1 million here and there. But if we're kind of learning anything here, it's that with the 32 teams and the more money available, and if you look at who was out there for you to sign, you're better off just paying the extra $1 million or giving the extra year to your guy, because you kind of know what you're getting. And it's like the fear of the unknown. I kind of think, like, if we're looking at how this is going to play out in the long term, it could just be the haves or the have-nots. Like, if you have them already, you'll try and keep them. If you don't have them, you're going to have to make some shrewd trades, or you're going to have to be bad and draft really well for a long time, and then maybe you get a big signing along the way, or maybe you make a blockbuster trade. But, like, I think that process of, like, rebuilding is going to be a lot more difficult now, with more money available. And so where does that leave the Conor Garland thing? It's like most teams, where if you have something that works and is good for you, retain it, because who were you going to replace him with out there at that money, and know exactly what you're getting? It's not exactly that simple anymore.
They re-up their wingers, and leaving that massive second line center hole. Now the Canucks can do a few different things here. They could just see what this particular group starts like and hope that Chytil can perform up to snuff. Or they could try to make a move either now or later in trading out some contracts. And they would have to nibble around the edges, try to trade away contracts, maybe like Bluger and Sherwood, maybe slightly bigger like Joshua and Höglander. You do that, though, you're then forced to entrust your AHL, albeit Calder Cup winning Abbotsford Canuck guys, for the entirety of a fourth line and maybe partially of a third line. Do you do that to bolster your second line center role, or do you stand pat and just see how this group starts?
I think right now, like, you're one of many teams that wants that quote unquote second line center. So I think that the thing that Canucks have going for them is, which is not very different than a team like Montreal. Like, they're pretty loaded up with picks and prospects if they wanted to go down that route to trade for a second line center. I think Vancouver, would be well suited as far as who they have in the system that other teams would like. But I guess at this point, you're kind of in this like wait and see. Like you're just in this holding pattern as far as who's going to be available for us. If Boston is bad to start the season, can people start picking off players from there? If Pittsburgh's bad, do you start making some calls on who they have? Like, so I would imagine, barring something opening up here and business kind of being open for certain players that it isn't today, you're probably going into the season with who you have. And I think, if Elias Pettersson, forget about playing like an $11.6 million player. If he can play like an $8 million player and Philip Chytil can be healthy, it's not dire. Like it's not like
horrific.
It's not. No, it's not. It's actually not bad. Like if Pettersson just plays like a first line center and Chytil plays like a 3A or a 2B, which I truly believe he is capable of if he's healthy. That's the biggest question mark for me. Is he healthy enough to do it, or can he stay healthy enough? Then I think you're okay. You're going to have to wait and see who becomes available.
Well, okay, so let me play devil's advocate and be the bad guy here.
You love that.
It's my brand. It's not dire. It's not terrible.
If those guys perform, but it's an if.
It is still, if the two ifs hit, we're still looking at what? Bottom third? Top two center group in the league?
Bottom of the middle third.
So somewhere between 15 and 20, you think?
Yeah, that would be my guess.
But I would say go in the Pacific more, like,
okay,
bring it lower. Okay, so you're not as good as Edmonton, for sure. Are you as good as Los Angeles if both those guys play as good as they can? I don't think you're that far off. Like Kopitar's 37. Quentin Byfield's a good player, but I don't think that's a significant, like that's not staggering for me. Like your Calgary is going to throw some combo.
Dano is number 3 there, so like 1 through 3, they're okay.
Calgary's going to throw Kadri Backlund at you. 2 good centermen, but I think the ceiling
pretty old. But pretty old.
The ceiling on Pettersson is higher for me.
Yeah.
Who else do we have? Like
Carlson and McTavish, the young kids in Anaheim.
So you got young guys there.
The kids in Seattle, Beniers and Wright. If Wright usurps Stevenson.
Seattle's an interesting one because they've basically loaded, like they have a high volume of centermen, but for me, they're not marquee guys yet. Like, I would say for sure you're behind Vegas. Like, that goes without saying. But I guess I don't see it if... Now, we have to preface this. If Pettersson plays like... Forget about 11.6. If he plays like 8.
Yeah,
and
80 points. 80 points.
Sure. Yeah, 70... Yeah, 80 points, I think, is fair for him. Point per game. And if Chytil's healthy. Yeah, it's not the worst. It's not the best. But I think you're pretty good with your winger position. You're pretty solidified in net. You have like $13 million tied up in 3 goalies. You better be solidified in net. And it's a good blue line. So, maybe some of that makes up for what you lack down the middle of the ice.
Okay, on the goalie situation, do you understand the Demko extension and paying goaltenders $13 million after this season?
On the surface... no one's really looking to do that for goaltenders. And I guess, Demko is healthy and not rehabbing right now and all that sounds great. I still think there's an element of we're going to have to see it to believe it. And once you have your answer there, then you can decide who's the odd man out. Is it Lankinen, who really felt like an insurance policy when things looked more dire for Demko? Or is it Shilovs, who played amazing in the AHL, but still has to turn himself into a legit NHL goalie, which is the next step. So it just feels like there's some balls up in the air as far as what you're going to do and when you're going to do it with your goaltending position. But I would say it's okay to have more options than less options, right? Like, see how it plays out. They wouldn't be the first team in the last little while to roll with 3 goaltenders for a little bit, and see what the best option is. Like Montreal did it, and they actually did it pretty well, I guess, by Sam Montembeault, because he's kind of established himself as a legit number one guy now. And having Jake Allen as that insulator with him and Caden Primo was okay. Now, Caden Primo probably would have something to say about that because he was the one who didn't really benefit from it. But different situation. I guess my point is, not the first team to have to roll with 3 goalies before they figure something out.
And it's not 13, but the Stanley Cup champions have $11.5 million in goaltending. It's mostly to one guy, but in terms of actual cap chunk, it's a good chunk.
They get all those hometown and state income tax discounts.
Right.
Well, the Bobrovsky that was not a state tax discount.
No, that was
we have to
overpaid.
overpay
all
for
the
this
contracts
guy.
since him have been the state income tax.
We're just talking in goal. We're just talking.
You know what that
Stay
is?
focused.
You know what that tax is? I'll tell you what that tax is as a former player. That is, my wife is so happy that every day she gets to take the kid for a nice walk on the beach and then go swimming in the pool, that I should probably take $1.5 million pay cut because life is pretty good and I don't want to mess with happy.
I think the Sun is the biggest winner on the Sun Belt teams. They're in the beach teams. Like, I selfishly speaking, if I was a Canadian hockey player and I knew we could play 6 months of the year and have that lifestyle that you're talking about, Anaheim, LA, and Florida would look pretty damn good to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And think about that. They want you. Those teams want you, and they're like, we'll still give you Aaron Ekblad, 6 times 8. It's pretty good living, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just too bad our beach is a little too damp.
It's a little damp in
We
the
got
January.
the damp beach,
Yeah.
need the dry beach. Here's and I just did a tour through the Western Conference top 2 centers. Here's the other learning, and Frank, I'm sorry to report this with you, but it used to be, mama, grow up your baby to be a right shot defenseman. Now it's have them take a lot of face-offs.
Yeah.
Center ice.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
So Christian Dvorak got $5.4 million in Philadelphia.
We noticed that.
Only 1 year, but still, yeah.
1 year. And I think part of that is Philly has to spend money. Like, San Jose is still not at the floor. Like, they're like $10 million below the floor, basically. So teams did have to spend money, but like watching him in Montreal this year, every big face-off that was on the left side of the ice, there was Christian Dvorak. Overtime started, there was Christian Dvorak, right? Like, he would go for the change as soon as he won it. But, when you're 57% in the dot, there will be teams that have use for you. I think Glenn Denning is another one of those guys in Tampa. He was like 58% last year. So I know, man. Yep, take the face-offs, be a right-handed defenseman, and don't skip power skating.
No.
Yeah.
No. Amazing stuff. Thank you, Frank. Until next week.
All right, boys. Have a good one. Enjoy
We'll
the
have
beach.
the center next week, I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoy the damp beach.